Now, we are using a Zoom webinar today. It is different to the Zoom meetings platform. We often ask or get asked why we're using a webinar to teach about a Zoom meeting. The reason is we want to assure your privacy. All the questions that you ask are completely private, so that only Vincent and I can view your names. And of course, when Vincent replies to you, it is 100% anonymous. So we are using a Zoom webinar, but we are going to be talking about a Zoom meeting. So keep that in mind. The tools you have at the bottom of your screen are as follows. We have a chat panel here. Now that chat panel is really important because anything that I post in there, you're going to be able to click on those today. And you're going to be able to download that content tomorrow as well. We also have a raise hand. Go ahead and raise your hand here for me. Excellent. I can see 27. I can see 31. It's still rising. So that raise hand, lower hand here, I can actually lower those for you now. So thank you. And then last of all, we have the Q&A. So this is where some of the attendees today have been asking questions already. You can pop your questions in there. You can send them anonymously if you wish, and then you can send them off to Vincent or I. Also, you can adjust your window size at the top of your screen if you see fit as well. Now, just going ahead and looking at the session information today, I've just shared the poll results with you as well. So you can see a whopping 92% of you are educators today. So I'm going to be putting a bit more focus on the educator component of things because there's only a couple of students in here today. I'm still going to be covering the student content as well. I can see that most of you are interested in interactive meeting tools. So I'm also going to put quite an emphasis on that, as well as hosting a meeting as well. A couple of you have attended live training, most of you haven't. So hopefully everyone's got the idea that you can ask questions at any time, like Nicole and Mansoor and Melanie as well. So go ahead and input those questions at any time, and we're going to go ahead and start. All right. So first things first, it's worth mentioning that we do have the ability to be able to test a meeting on your computer. If you go to zoom.us/test, and I'll get Vincent to put that in the chat, you can simply go ahead and click on or navigate to that page, and you can join a test meeting. Now that will set up your internet connection, and it will allow you to play with some of those controls without signing up for an account, without joining a meeting from someone else. So joining a meeting test is really important because you can get a feel for how the Zoom system works without actually signing up for an account. Now, as a show of hands, raise your hand if your organization uses Moodle, uses Canvas, uses Blackboard, or uses a learning management system. So it can be any sort of management system. I can see the numbers rising here. So around 50 to 60% of you have some sort of licenses. So that's quite good. That usually means that the way that you join as a learner will most likely be inside Moodle, Canvas, or Blackboard. One thing you do have to know though, and have to recognize, is that if you join a Zoom meeting, you're always going to have to click on a URL. So you're going to have to click on a join link to start that meeting. Now, there are a number of different ways you can use these Zoom meetings. You can input them into different locations, but do know that it's worthwhile joining on a computer or a mobile phone. And that is because this link that you're going to be clicking on really does require that you use either one of those two methods. Also know too that if you use a mobile phone to connect, it will require you to use the Zoom app. So it's going to ask you to firstly download the Zoom application before you join. So make sure you allow a bit of extra time if you're joining from a mobile device. How you're going to join is you're going to find the information. It may be an instant message. It may be an email from your lecturer. It may be a unit of study. It may be something like a post in Blackboard, a post in Moodle, etc. So it may be a way of just finding that information, would probably just be in a unit. From that point, you're going to choose the device you want to use. Now, we do recommend that you join via a computer. Now, the reason why is because it has a larger screen. So if your educator is going ahead and sharing content with finer detail, then you're going to be able to see that detail. Whereas if you join from a mobile device with a smaller screen, it may be difficult to see some of that learning content. So just keep that in mind when you choose your device. And then once you connect, depending on how the educator has set up the content, they may ask you to fill in polling, which is what I saw you, which is what I saw everyone fill in today. They may use breakout rooms, and I'm going to explain what breakout rooms are. They may use non-verbal gestures or chat in order to communicate with you as well. So you may not just be sitting and watching a lecture. Your educator may ask you to do things on top of that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend to click on this link here. So if I go ahead and I click on that link, what it's going to do is it's going to open a browser. So it can be Google Chrome, it can be Edge, it can be Safari. And what Zoom's asking you to do is to run the file that pops up on your computer. Once you go ahead and run that file, you just follow the prompts from the browser window there. You can click here to download it, but usually it automatically downloads on your computer. And just be aware as well, if you can't join from any other way, you can start from your browser. The browser has a limited sort of experience when it comes to meetings, so we prefer if you go ahead and open that file from zoom.us. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like when I actually start a meeting later too. So I've started my meeting here. And you can see at the bottom of your screen, there are a couple of buttons here. These buttons are different depending on if you're the host or the educator, or whether you're a student. But of course, the things you need to do first is to check your audio settings. That little up arrow that you see is actually a menu button. I can go ahead and test my speaker and microphone at any time, and we recommend you test your microphone and speaker before you set it up. Pardon me. And then the next thing you'd probably want to do is set up your video, because it's always good to be on video. We recommend that you start and you use your video at all times. The up arrow here will also allow you to check your video settings. And then from here, I can do things like touching up my appearance if I wish. I can enable HD video. Also, you have the ability to upload virtual or use virtual backgrounds. If you take a look at my video here, you can see that I actually have a virtual background today. So I'm using a green screen, and I'm actually going ahead and I'm using a screen and I'm projecting an image onto that. So if you go into virtual background, you're able to go ahead and upload videos and upload those single image files from your computer to create your own backgrounds. There also is a button here as well to invite participants. That allows me to invite anyone from inside my organization. I can also view the list of everyone else in the meeting, whether it's the educators or whether it's the students. You can see here I can tell when people have their microphones unmuted. I can tell when they have their video cameras on or off. I can also give non-verbal prompts to the educator as well. Go faster, go slower, and I can give those prompts and the educator will see that on their screen. I can also share screen if the educator wants me to share any content. I can also go ahead and use the chat. Now, the educator itself might actually ask you to participate in the chat, answer questions, facilitate a debate. As someone in the meeting, you can go ahead and upload files up to 512 megabytes. So think about things like assessments that the educator might have uploaded. You may need to upload other pieces of information for group work, and you can go ahead and use group chat. Also, if you're given permission to record, you can also record onto your computer as well. So they are the basic tools at the top of your screen. They're the tools that you're most likely to use as a student or as someone who is joining the meeting to sort of watch that webinar, watch that session. So that is the way that you can go ahead and use the tools. Now, at the bottom of your screen, these are the controls for the host. So the person that is running that training, the person that is running that session, the educator. You'll see there are some differences between both though, and those differences really are around how many tools you can use, and then some of the settings that you can also apply as well. Now, you'll see here the Manage Participants button. So you can actually mute and unmute anyone in those meetings. So as a host, or a co-host, because you can actually nominate people to help you in the meeting. You can actually mute or unmute anyone's microphones. You can actually lower people's hands when they have them raised. So for example, I'm lowering everyone's hands now. So you can do a number of things with those participants there as well. And we're going to actually show you what that looks like in a meeting soon. Also, you have the ability to run polling. Now, if you voted in today's poll, you'll see that myself, the host, can run the polls. I can stop the polls. I can share those results. So as an educator, you can use them for surveys. You can use them for revision. And you can go ahead and use them for qualitative and quantitative purposes as well. Here is where I can share a screen, but I can also change those settings as well. I can actually lock it so that only I as the host can share, or I can allow anyone in that meeting to share content as well. Here is where I can view the chat, but also as the host, I can save any of that chat as a text file as well. I also have the ability here to use what's called cloud recording and then record locally to my computer. So cloud recordings are kept in your account at zoom.us, and local recordings are an MP4 file, and they're just a singular file that's stored on your computer. So you can either record to your computer, or you can actually record to the cloud and have those stored at zoom.us. We also have the option here for closed caption as well. So closed captionists is someone in your meeting that can actually type the content that's being spoken out. You can also use breakout rooms as well. Now we're going to cover breakout in a little more detail later on, but breakout rooms are essentially a way of splitting your meeting for group work and for smaller sessions. So I can have a number of different rooms, and as the host and as the co-host that I nominate, they can move between those separate rooms. So it's like putting students in separate classrooms and being able to move between them for group work. And then last of all, we also have the ability to stream. So if your learner management system has the ability to allow live streaming, you can actually set it up so that as soon as you start a meeting, you can stream live straight to the learner management system. So if you have any questions around that, feel free to go ahead and ask those at any time. I'll just check the Q&A before I move on. Brian says, why do you choose to use a headset with mic rather than those offered on the webcam? It's the quality of the audio. If I move my head around like this, the quality of the audio doesn't actually change. So we prefer to use those when we have multiple screens and we're moving our head around. If it stays in one location, you'll have an issue with that. Can a removed participant re-enter the same meeting? The answer is no, Nicole. If you remove someone from a meeting, they cannot re-enter that meeting again. Okay. Katrina says, can the host prevent participants from recording? So that recording option I showed you before, the host needs to grant anyone permission to record. So by default, only the host can record. And also, just an add-on to that question as well about removing participants, it does depend on the settings that you set up as well. So you can allow some to return, but it depends on the setup as well. Excellent. Keep those questions coming in. Like I said, Katrina and Scott and a number of people are asking those questions, and we're taking your questions live. And then Vincent's also furiously typing in the background too. So that was the student part of the session. You can see here that there's a number of tips. These tips that I put on my screen are actually a handout that we're going to give to you. So look out for that in your inbox tomorrow. We'll actually have a link to those resources for you here as well. Now, we're moving to the portion of the session today where most people are at, which is the educators. You can go ahead and log into your settings at zoom.us. If you've been given an account to use, then you're able to use your email address and password to log in there. What I will say though, is that there's so many different ways you can use Zoom. What I mean by that is, you can use Zoom within Sakai, you can use Zoom within Canvas, within Blackboard, so you don't actually have to go outside of your management system in order to check your settings, in order to view your recordings, in order to do a number of things that I'm going to show you now. So I'm not going to use a learner management system. I'm going to show you the basic principles. And then if you have any other questions outside of that on how to use it in your system, reach out to your help desk, because your help desk will have a good understanding on how this works. For example, you can schedule in Sakai or in your learner management system, but I'm actually going to show you how to do that at zoom.us in the web portal. You can also start meetings and run meetings within Sakai and Moodle and Blackboard, but I'm going to show you how that works at zoom.us. So you can take some of those things and you can use them within your learner management system. All right. So we're going to move to scheduling. I'm going to show you some of the scheduling options, and then we're going to start a meeting and we're going to run into this. What I want to do though, just to break things up a little, is I want to go ahead and I want to run a poll. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this poll. If you can vote on the screen and vote in that poll, that would be fantastic. If you're using the web browser to join, you won't actually see this poll today, so keep that in mind. Joe says, is there a way students could work on writing a document at the same time in groups? Joe, what we do is we usually use a program like Google Docs, and then someone will generally share their screen, and someone will generally just write in that. So we use Google Docs or those collaborative tools like OneNote. Might actually be a way to work together. We do have annotation tools, but if you want something solid, then I recommend perhaps the Google Suite would work. Sandra says, do you have to set a virtual background every time you go into a meeting? It'll take the previous settings from the previous meeting. So the virtual background I set up today when I started my camera was actually from the previous meeting I joined a little while ago. So it's taken from there. Hyung Woo says, is there a function that can automatically check students' attendance? You can run a report, and when you run a report from a meeting, it will show you who has attended as well. All right. Excellent. What I might do is end the poll, and as I predicted, breakout rooms are really useful for educational purposes, so I'm not surprised that everyone has voted for breakout rooms. So we're going to cover those in that order as well. So because scheduling wasn't so much of a topic that was voted for, I'm just going to show you where to schedule. I'm not going to actually go through that process in great detail. Now this is at zoom.us when I've logged in. Here is where you can find your reports. So if you want to take attendance after the meeting has ended, you can actually go into the meeting section here and you can run a report on who attended, their email address, how long they attended for. Here is the settings. So you see the settings are split into 3 separate types. So the basic meeting settings, the recording settings, and the telephone settings. Here is your recordings. So you'll see under recordings, we have 2 options. So cloud recordings are listed here. And in order to share out the cloud recording, you just have to go ahead and share the link. Because it's kept at zoom.us, you don't have to share a bulky file. The local recordings will show you where it's kept, and you'll actually have to physically transfer that large file if you want to share it or upload it to somewhere else. Here is the webinars tab. So we're using a webinar today, but do note that the webinar is an add-on to your meetings license. And here is the meetings tab. Now you'll see here upcoming meetings, previous meetings, and you're able to go ahead and you're able to start any of those scheduled meetings from here as well. Last of all, I just want to cover profile, because the profile tab here at the top is actually the summary of your account. So here's all your account details. If you're unsure of the license type, you'll be able to find halfway down. You can actually find out what sort of license you'll have if your educational department has given you one. All right. So under meetings here, I'm going to go ahead and click schedule. Now I just want to cover some of the important ones here. For example, when I schedule a meeting, I can actually go down to recurring meeting, and I can schedule meetings daily, weekly, monthly, or no fixed time. That means that I can have a weekly meeting, that happens on a Wednesday, and I can schedule out those Wednesdays for up to 20 weeks in advance. So rather than scheduling a Zoom meeting every week, I schedule it once and it happens every Wednesday. So that's one thing to remember. The next one down here as well is the schedule for. So if you are someone who doesn't schedule your meetings, or you want to schedule on someone's behalf, you can actually add that in the settings, add that person in the settings. And if they're part of your educational account, then they can schedule meetings on your behalf. And then down the bottom here, I just want to cover these meeting options because they're the most important. So join before host will allow me to go ahead and schedule a meeting without me attending that meeting. Or alternatively, if I'm late, that meeting will still start at the selected time. Mute participants upon entry means that everyone will join with their microphones muted, and they'll have to turn them on. The waiting room is what I'm going to show you soon, but that's used for things like virtual office hours. Only authenticated users means that anyone who wants to join the meeting will need to have a Zoom account. Breakout room pre-assign means that we can go ahead and add the list of those participants that will join the meeting, and we can automatically assign them as soon as they join. And recording the meeting automatically will be in the cloud with a paid license, or a free license will allow it on the computer as well. Alternative hosts are simply just someone who's part of my account or my organization, and I can nominate them to run meetings on my behalf. So they're the most important things you need to remember. Now, if I click save, that meeting will be saved, and I can go ahead and send that information out. But what I really want to do is just get into the controls today, because that's what everybody really wants to learn today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my demo meeting here. I'm actually going to go ahead and click start, and I'm going to start my meeting. Now you'll see this option here I showed you before in the students. Please open zoom.us. It'll see here that I'm going to open it, and then the meeting will run. So just give me a moment to set it up. And it's going to start. Okay. All right, I've just frozen my screen, and I'm just going to make sure that we are good to go. Okay, so we're good to go. So as you can see, it's almost exactly the same as the student's point of view. But what you can now see is I have these buttons at the bottom that the students don't. Things like breakout rooms, things like closed caption, and polling here. Now, obviously, the first thing I need to do as an educator as well is to go ahead and set up my microphone and video. You'll see those options are exactly the same as a student. You can go ahead and select the camera, you can choose your virtual background, etc. Now, this has flashed, this Manage Participants panel. That means that some participants have entered. You can see that I have the waiting room turned on. So 2 people have entered the waiting room. Now, they actually haven't joined yet. They're actually in this waiting room. What that looks like when I open up the panel for you is that we have 2 waiting. And what I can do is I can actually message them to say, just wait a moment, I'll admit you when I'm ready. Or I can go ahead and admit them. Now, I can turn this off and on at any time. And how I do that is click the More button here. And here is where I can go ahead and put them in waiting room upon entry. Here is where I can go ahead and lock and unlock the meeting. I can allow the students to rename themselves. I can mute them upon entry, etc. So some of those settings I showed you in the schedule options is actually available to use live. Now I want to admit both these participants, so admit all. Now I can see when their microphones and video cameras are turned off and on. I was talking before about a co-host. Now how I make Brian a co-host is if I hover over his name, I click on the More tab here, the More tab here, and here is where I can make him a co-host. I can allow Brian to record here. I can ask to start Brian's video. Now, as a host, I can't turn people's video cameras on. I just need to ask permission for them to do so. So a lot of those settings that I can apply to Brian are in that More tab as well. So I'm now going to make Brian a co-host. Make co-host. Now, if anything happens and I get cut off from the meeting, then Brian will actually take over as being the host. So that's another reason why it's great to add a co-host. All right. What I might do is I want to show you polling next. So we're going to move from left to right here. Here is the polling option. So this is what it looked like to me when I ran the poll with you all at the start of the session today and then halfway through. You'll see that I have a down arrow here that I can go ahead and I can use. Now, these are my existing polls. I can create polls ahead of time. And then if I want to go ahead and run a poll, I'll simply just check or choose the one. Perhaps it was this is an example. And I will click launch. Now, as soon as I click launch, you'll actually see that pop up on your screen. So that's the exact process I used today to run a poll with you in this webinar. You'll see that attendees are viewing questions. You'll see who has seen the questions and how many and the percentage of those that have voted as well. I usually end the polls at around 75% because not everyone can view them. Also, other people in that meeting or webinar, may not actually be at the computer as well. Now, at the end of that poll, I'll click End Poll here. And then I can end the poll and share the results. So that's why the poll disappeared from your screen and it popped up again, is because I've actually chosen to share those results. Now, if I click Edit, it will actually take me back to the scheduled meeting, and I can add a new poll whenever I like. So I can add the title for the poll, I can make it anonymous, or I can make it compulsory there. I can add a question, and I can give it a multiple choice answer or a single choice answer there as well. I can have 10 questions per poll. I can have 25 polls per meeting. Now, if I have a meeting that's scheduled for every single Wednesday as an occurrence, if I create a poll on the first Wednesday, then that poll will be available for each Wednesday that I schedule it for. So that's the benefit of using a recurring meeting or a meeting that happens over multiple weeks or months, is because if you create a poll on one, you'll be able to actually go ahead and see that poll on all of those single meetings that you've got. So just remember that if you do create it on a recurring webinar or actually a meeting, you can go ahead and view it at any time and launch it at any time in those meetings. Okay, so I'm going to leave this open here. And I'm going to move to share screen. So you can see today that I'm sharing my screen, and you saw from the image at the start of the session that I just am sharing my entire monitor. I'm using a PowerPoint today for that presentation. Now you'll see that I have 3 desktops here. They are the 3 monitors connected to my computer. I can share my desktop, or I can go ahead and share just the PowerPoint, just Google Chrome, etc. So I can share everything on my screen, or I can share just an application. Also, I have the option of sharing computer sound here. Now that is the classical music that you heard at the start of the session today. This was this one here. Also, I can optimize for full screen video clip. That's really helpful. When I optimize for full screen video clip, I can actually play movies and videos and have it play in really high quality. So just a tip there, if you do want to play videos or play YouTube clips, if you optimize for full screen video clip, it increases the quality of that video for everyone in the session. In the advanced tab, I can also share from document cameras, so secondary cameras here. I may want to just share computer sound, and if I have any sort of file stored at any of these different applications, I can actually launch that directly from there as well. Now, watch what happens to the screen when I click share. If I go back to my PowerPoint, it actually disappears from the bottom and it actually floats on top. Now this toolbar that you see here, I actually have one of those on my screen, but it's invisible to everyone in the meeting. All of those panels that I showed you earlier, they're all invisible as well. So if I do want to go ahead and use the poll here, this poll that I was talking about, if I do want to drag any of my panels from today's webinar or meeting on top of my presentation, it's actually invisible to everyone anyway. So I can move this toolbar around and no one can see it. I can move those windows around between different monitors and people can't see it either. So just know that that toolbar is invisible and it floats on top of your presentation. We also have the ability to use annotation tools. Now you might have saw a little while ago that I was using annotation. I was actually using this button here. So I can use that tool at any time. And I was using the draw button here. You can use stamping tools. We have questions about what this little red halo is around my mouse. That's actually the pointer for the spotlight. And then of course we've got formatting tools as well, and I can clear those drawings at any time like that. So it does take a little bit of practice, but know that when you share your screen, anyone in that meeting can annotate. So anyone has access to be able to annotate. And as the educator or the host, you can actually lock that annotation too. If you want to go ahead and share different screens, because we had a question earlier about that, you can actually move between different desktops. So if I wanted to share the screen in front of me, then I wanted to share the screen next to me, I can go ahead and I can select that really quickly. Also, there is a pause share. I've actually used this a couple of times already this morning, and that allows me to freeze the screen for yourselves, and I can go back, retrieve documents, move between different presentations, and no one else knows that that happens. Now, when I hit resume, it obviously just starts and refreshes the screen, and whatever I'm looking at that point is now broadcast live again. So you can also see there are more meeting options, and any of the tools at the bottom of the screen that used to be there are actually accessible from this More tab here. So you can go ahead, you can share computer sound, you can turn that off or on. Also, you can optimize or not optimize depending on the content there as well. So lots of different things you could do there. It's really, really handy. Just know that that toolbar that I've used creates or allows you to move any of these options around my screen at any time, and they're completely invisible to everyone else. All right. Let me just go back and check the Q&A now. If I mute upon entry, can they unmute themselves? Yes. So if I do use this option here in the participants panel to mute on entry, they'll just have to unmute themselves in order to speak. So yes, they can unmute themselves if they wish. All right, so you know, excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. We're now just going to show you chat. Now the only difference between the chat I've shown you before is that you can lock it down and you can open it up. So for example, I have public and private chat available, which means I can go ahead and message Brian, and that is a private chat between Brian and I. Also, I can share files privately to Brian as well. So for example, I want to share an assessment with Brian. Perhaps Brian hasn't actually found that assessment online. I can actually send him that file privately as well. So that's a really great way of going ahead and sending out documents, putting assessments into the chat as well so everyone can download them. You can either send them publicly to everyone or you can send files privately as well. Now, the last one I want to cover is breakout rooms here. So we have a number of different rooms we can create. Depending on the number of students, you may want to create the rooms manually or automatically. You may wish to assign those students manually or automatically. And when I click create, it doesn't actually open them up. You'll actually see the words here, not started. So as a co-host, they can actually help me set up the breakout rooms. They can also go ahead and move between those breakout rooms too. So instead of having one person managing this, create a whole number of co-hosts and the co-host can move between the rooms. I can also assign students, I can move them, I can swap them between the different rooms. I can allow them to return to the main session at any time. I can close the rooms automatically after a certain period of time. And then I can also set countdown timers. Now, the timers are useful because if you have a number of people who need to save their work, the timer allows them some time to be able to save it and then present it back to the main audience again. Now, if I want to go ahead and open those rooms, I just click open, and then everyone will move to those rooms automatically. You'll see the video cameras move from the background here behind, and they'll move into those rooms, and you'll see them there. Now, at any time, if I want to go back and I want to move between the breakout rooms, I click the breakout room button, and then next to each room will be the word join. I simply just go through, and I'll move between those rooms. Students can also ask for help as well, and they can ask for help. You can broadcast messages to all the rooms, so you may wish to broadcast messages about the time that they have left, some hints and tips, etc. And then at any time you can close down those rooms, or you can have that timer set up so they automatically close after a certain amount of time. So like I said, the host and the co-host can move between those rooms. So think of your co-hosts as being teacher aides or facilitators that can go into those rooms and help those students with the group work. Okay, what I might do is I might do some Q&A now, and then we'll wrap up in a moment. That's almost the 45 minutes time, so it's gone quite quickly. Let's see here. What about polls for quizzes? Would you recommend that? Polls for quizzes, you can actually use polls for quizzes because if you go ahead and you run a report, you can actually go ahead and view the poll results. So which student actually voted for which option. Let's see. Yes, we'll have a recording for you, Tia, tomorrow in your email. Can the host share the screen with everyone when students are in the breakout rooms? Yes. So when you move to those breakout rooms, everyone can share their screens. And also, if you have a co-host in the breakout rooms, the co-hosts can record the breakout rooms. So that is one thing you can do as well. All right. Let's see, a couple of other questions. How does the participant know when the host is recording the meeting? I think it's this one, near my finger up here somewhere. There should be in the corner of the screen, up here, there should actually be a little button here. So if I click record and record to the computer, you'll now see the recording button. So that recording is visible to every student in the meeting itself or in the session. I can go ahead and I can pause the recording at any time. I can play or start the recording at any time. Now this little recording button here with a circle means it goes to the computer. If you take a look at our webinar today, you'll see that the recording button is a cloud, and that means it's recording into the cloud, so it's a cloud recording. So you can actually see visually where it's going to as well. Let's see. Manswar says, I was not clear on how to assign my 32 students into 4 breakout rooms. So in this example, we have, say, 32 students, breakout rooms. You would go ahead and you would create those, 4 breakout rooms. So you go ahead and create 4 breakout rooms, and then Zoom would automatically assign those students to those rooms for you. For example, if I wanted to move Brian to a different room, I could actually move him as well. And the more students there, you'll actually see all their names listed under each of the rooms, and you'll just click on their name to move them around. So Young says, how can I choose files from my computer for share screen? So I did also go ahead and click on share screen earlier. If I go to the files section here, that is where I can go ahead and use these integrations here. Now, if you if you don't have these 4 programs, you can simply just go to basic and you can share your desktop. So you can just share your screen and then open up the file on your screen. and then it's shared with everyone. Kevin says, can you get an audio notification when someone raises a hand? You'll actually get a little notification here next to Manage Participants to say when someone raised their hand. So I can see that Rosa, Zoran, and Carlos have their hands raised now. Are there any limits on how many members can be in a breakout room? I believe I'll get Vincent to answer that. My memory is a little iffy on that. But I believe it's no, I'll get Vincent to answer that one for you. Calvin says, is there a quick tutorial or video for new students who haven't used this system before? Yes. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to put some information in the chat. And that's a really great way to sort of wrap up the session. In the chat there, you've actually seen that I've got a link at the bottom of the screen in the chat for Zoom support. Now I'm going to click on that link now. And this is what it takes you to. So here, I can search for topics. So if I say virtual background, I'll be able to search for a topic. Here is where we have our getting started session. So I can actually click through and there's some frequently asked questions. There's some tips and tricks there. We also have our 1-minute video introductions here. So these are all the different videos that we offer, for example, joining a meeting, recording a meeting. And also at support.zoom.us, you can actually see here we have live training. So this is our Zoom for Education session. We have a number of live sessions that happen throughout the week as well. So my suggestion would be to jump onto support.zoom.us and you can go ahead and browse all those different topics as well. Great question. Hyungwoo says, is it possible for us to upload recorded content real time to YouTube? Yes. So, Hyungwoo, if you want to go ahead and click on the More tab here, you can actually go straight to Facebook, Workplace by Facebook, or there's an option in the settings to go live to YouTube. And that would require you to sign in and you can go to, you can stream live to YouTube as well. Okay. If you can't access zoom.us in China, you access the link zoom.com.cn, and that is the Zoom link for China as well. So John, to answer your question, in China it's not zoom.us, it's zoom.com.cn. Excellent. All right, it is time for me to wrap up. Those 45 minutes have gone really quickly today. I do have a survey at the bottom of your screen in the chat. Please go ahead and fill it in. It'll take around 60 to 90 seconds of your time. It really helps me improve my practice as an educator as well. So I really encourage you to go ahead and do so. What I do need to say though is join us again. We have a number of live training sessions happening throughout the week. As a matter of fact, we have over 30 sessions per week scheduled in. So at zoom.us/live training, look for our trainings there and also look for our recordings because we also have a large number of recordings from our sessions too. I have mentioned that we have customer support available 24/7. You can always submit a ticket at support.zoom.us and our professionals will get back to you in quick time.